Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. You are welcome to this panel this afternoon on gender and local economic development, unlocking domestic capital for women's economic empowerment and entrepreneurship. I'd just like to provide you with a bit of context here. This is happening, of course, on the anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Under that declaration, under the Platform for Action, as you know, there is a specific section on the economy under which governments have made commitments to, under the strategic objective F2, facilitate women's equal access to resources, employment, markets and trade, to provide business services, training and access to markets, information and technology, particularly to low-income women. And strategic objective F4 is to strengthen women's economic capacity and commercial networks. These are the strategic objectives our governments have been working on for the last 20 years. And from that, the learning that we have is that it's very important to take these international commitments down not only to the national level, but very much to the local level, to understand the constraints that women entrepreneurs face to becoming successful and to start addressing and unlocking opportunities for women entrepreneurs in developing countries. As such, it's our very great pleasure as one of the joint organisers here today, UN Women, UNCDF and others, to have a distinguished panel of ministers from Sweden and Canada, His Excellency from Tanzania, joining us here today to share their national experience. Also colleagues from the United Nations Capital Development Fund, here to my left, and Luna Shamsudoha, who is an entrepreneur from Bangladesh. To put the focus where it needs to be today, we're going to start with Luna Shamsudoha, who is the CEO of Doha Tech, an IT company in Bangladesh. Before Luna takes the floor, I'd just like to let you know how this session is going to work, so that you know when you can ask the questions that you came here to ask. Luna will speak briefly on her experience as an entrepreneur in Bangladesh. Then the Minister from Sweden will make opening remarks, after which our panelists will speak. Following their intervention, you'll be given the opportunity to ask questions. We're taking questions through Twitter. You can see the Twitter addresses there on the screen, and also at the end of the session of the panelist interventions by the traditional raising of hands. So here we are. This is the format for this afternoon's presentation. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite Luna Shamsudoha, please, to share her experience as a woman entrepreneur from Bangladesh. Please can we make our panelists, and in particular Luna, welcome.
Thank you, Honourable Ministers and Ambassadors, distinguished audience here. I come from Bangladesh, where we are known for technology, and I started my business in 1992 in software development. It has been a huge amount of challenge, which I don't want to talk about, because I didn't relent to any of those. And I'm here after 23 years, still kicking and still wanting to go ahead, learning every day, every moment. And the way technology is going, I don't think I'll stop learning the day I die. You know, it's going to go on. I've been as women entrepreneur from emerging market, Bangladesh has really emerged in many ways. You know about microfinance, and you know about the ready-made garment remittances that's coming in, and also the ready-made garment, most of you do know Bangladesh, a label made in Bangladesh. It's been a challenge otherwise as entrepreneurs, not in micro, but over that. And in small and medium or larger business, women, we don't get to see women. Of course, there are challenges like any of us over the globally that we face. Access to finance, access to market, human resource, domain knowledge, and on and on and on. But I'd like to address these in a different way today, you know, that yes, access to finance is the most critical thing that we need to look at. But why not look at it in a different way? Yes, we need money. We don't have collateral. Women don't have assets. And more so in countries like ours where we are, of course, moderate Muslims. But we as women, we don't own any much. Our siblings, brothers and sisters, is 2:1. Husbands don't give you enough. If it's a girl child, I can go on and on and on. And it's a policy that has to change for us to really own assets and collateral. But why not look at the issue of intellectual property that we have? In IT, we have intellectual property. All our assets are in intellectual property. Artists, film. If they want to set up a gallery, why not have? Her funding for her would be extremely difficult. The other thing I would like to also address is, of course, access to information. That is a very, very critical thing, and that is being addressed as well over the years. And also, women, we have, the niche knowledge for women to come up, be in business. What is there? What is the opportunity? I find there are many, many challenges, but I find that these are, and especially in domestic market, every country has their own problem. But access to finance, but I would particularly like all of you to look at, why can't we look at this in a different way? Innovative financing, innovative assessment of companies. The other thing that I would also like to see, that if women had one-stop a solution, an incubator or something to start business up, there we would see more women coming up to in business, you see. That is the biggest challenge, infrastructure, mobility, security for women coming up, you see. If women were mobile in India or Bangladesh, you would see how many women would come into business. And these are challenges. I come from a country where we don't, nobody's stopping me, I don't think things as a challenge, but there are women who don't, they are not mobile, they can't be on the road. Even my engineers who's been with me for 16 years, she can't go home at 10 o'clock at night. So these are things that we need to address before we really see women coming up on board and be in the absolutely mainstream business. Thank you very much. I'd like to I can go on, but this is something that is very close to my heart. And women need skills, women need know-how to do business, yes. But security is the main issue here that I feel, and a few other things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luna. Luna has underlined for us the multifaceted nature of unlocking women's entrepreneurship. It is about access to finance, but there are a number of other concerns which need to be taken into account at the same time. Of course, now is a critical juncture within the United Nations, an intergovernmental negotiation process to understand what these are as we move from the Millennium Development Goals to the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, the government of Sweden is very much seized of these issues, and so I call upon Her Excellency, the Minister, Asa Reina, the Minister for Children, the Elderly and Gender Equality in the Ministry of Health and Social Affairs of Sweden, to provide the keynote address, please. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. Can I use your mic?
Maybe.
Yeah. Gender analysis of the microphones. Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you so much to the organizers for organizing this. And thank you all for coming. I'm very impressed with the interest today in this seminar. It is an important topic, no doubt. And as the moderator pointed out, obviously to Sweden, and today we had almost like a Nordic day, many meetings with the Nordic countries. And for all of us, it is very important that the gender dimension in the new in the post-2015 agenda stays strong, and that it doesn't get weakened in the process until the decisions in September. And obviously, this meeting is very important as a ground and an input to that. I also represent a feminist government. The Swedish Prime Minister declared the new government, which was appointed last year in October, officially a feminist government. And that means that we have lots of opportunities, but also lots of responsibilities. It's about we have to deliver, obviously, on this. And that means that we will have to set up clear targets. We have our own process, and be able to measure that we actually take decisions, allocate resources, and prioritize with the aim of gender equality in whatever we do. To us, and in the Swedish context, labour market participation and good working conditions for both women and men has always, or at least since the 70s, been a priority. And the Swedish labour force consists of almost as many women as men. This is also a way, we think, to sustain gender equality, although I cannot say that we have reached gender equality. We still have problems, as I mentioned before. But it is good, we find it, for women's rights. But it is also a way to create economic growth in general. We see gender equality as a motor for the whole society. It's a rights issue, but it's a vehicle to advance the whole society. Economic growth, to make sure that we use investments in education that the whole population has. You know, women and girls perform very well in educational systems, in my country at least, and I know that's true in many other countries. So you have to also make sure that you use all the skills and competence in society. It's also a way of making sure that children have access and contacts with both parents. So that's how we see a good society model where gender equality is really a vehicle, an engine of all of this, and not a present to women, if you see what I mean. I also want to say, before I enter a bit more in the topic, that obviously when you talk about entrepreneurship and labour market participation for women and girls, and also when you talk about boys and men, it's just that it's never questioned. But anyway, you have to also work with issues like sexual and reproductive health and rights. If women cannot decide about their bodies, when to marry, who to marry, or to live alone, when to have children, or if they want, if or not to have children, it's very difficult to take up paid work or start a company. So I think that's important to point out. And also, it shouldn't be necessary to mention that, especially with women, but it is the experience, I think, in many countries that you need to organize childcare, elderly care, etc., since that is traditionally what women do as unpaid work, although it should be distributed much more equally between women and men. So I think that women's economic empowerment is essential for many reasons. And that is, of course, because of their own rights and their own capacity to earn their own incomes. That is as important for women as for men. But we also know that from research that women who are economically empowered do also invest a lot of their earnings in their children and the future of their children, which is good for the children, obviously, but also for society, of course. It's also, we also know that enhancing women's access to resources, to education, and employment and entrepreneurship is good for the well-being of households in general. But it's also true that when you ask women, as well as men, it's true that they want to be economically independent. They want to depend on themselves and to be able to take decisions out of their own will and dreams. and expectations. They don't want to depend on men or the state economically. They can choose to live with someone, they can choose different ways of living, but they want to be able to make those choices, and many times their own income is very, very important. So I think that we have to work on innovative ways to boost women's participation in the private sector through entrepreneurship, and I think we heard good examples of what could be improved and done. I think also it's, as I said before, you also have to pay attention to women's needs and the fact that women many times are discriminated against, and make sure, from the government side at least, that you try to support and push as well as you can women's possibilities to take the steps they like to be economically active. I think also here that many women's organizations have experiences and networks and can be good partners in discussing these issues. Many times, as we know, also in the least developed countries, women are the poorest of the poor, and that in itself, of course, is many times a problem when you want to take up paid work. We also know that many times also when women work, they can work long hours and 7 days a week, but still earn so little that they don't get out of poverty. So I think that it is important for any actor in this, governments, organizations, cooperation partners, etc., to keep an eye on that and to make sure that working conditions are decent, and not see women's incomes as a side income, but the main income, just as it is for men. I think also that the Inclusive and Equitable Local Development Programme is a programme that sets out to alleviate some of the most pressing obstacles to women's economic participation, which I think is very good, by equipping local authorities and the private sector with financial, as you pointed out, and technical means to plan and implement gender-sensitive investments. So I think that is very positive, and from the Swedish side again, we have a long history of friendship and cooperation with many of the countries that we are talking about here today, and we will also in future and in relation to the new post-2015 agenda work together in any way that we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So a Swedish feminist government, I think that deserves another round of applause. Sweden leading the way there, leading the way. This, of course, means a feminist foreign policy, so we look forward to hearing a little bit more about that, perhaps in question time. Her Excellency underlined the very important aspect of income, women earning independent income, of course, for the United Nations. This is critical in the countries where we work, like the United Nations Capital Development Fund, operating in countries where there are, of course, a high number of female-headed households for reasons that include conflict, that include men seeking work elsewhere and leaving women to head families. These are some of the circumstances in which the United Nations is working very closely with women. And I'd like to invite Ms. Judith Karl, the Executive Secretary of the UNCDF, for her remarks, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and what a pleasure to be here with all of you. It's so great to be part of such a distinguished panel. And to see such a full room, and maybe I'll take the liberty just to particularly recognize His Excellency the Ambassador from Tanzania for agreeing to be the only man on our panel. We all know what that feels like, so yes, thank you very much. So we're here today to talk about how we can collectively step it up to unlock domestic capital for women's economic empowerment and entrepreneurship. We all know that we're at really, I think, a watershed moment. I think we all share the view that this could be a watershed moment as the post-2015 agenda is entering its final stages of negotiation. as we see the promise of innovation and change in the Financing for Development agenda coming up in June, and with the UNFCCC Conference of Parties in Paris in November. So collectively, these are a huge opportunity for the international community. We believe that gender equality and women's empowerment must be at the heart of each of these agendas, individually and collectively. In the 20 years since representatives of the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing crafted the unprecedented platform for action, a lot of progress has been achieved, and we've also learned many, many lessons. For instance, we know that financial inclusion for women results in increased household welfare and more vibrant local economies. Emerging sex-disaggregated demand-side data on access and use of financial services shows that women on average are less financially included than men, even in countries with relatively high levels of overall financial inclusion. The financial inclusion gender gap is frequently 10% or more. But we also know that the policy and regulatory environment is critical for better financial inclusion, so that in a country like South Africa, 9% more women are banked than men, and only 11% are excluded compared to 18% of men. But overall, research shows that women are more reliant on informal mechanisms for their financial requirements, and these informal mechanisms are more costly, less reliable, and less likely to have financial products that are adapted to women's actual needs. We also know that demand is high for financial services, and that the larger the available clientele, the more attractive the market is to investors. So we use SMART ODA. We here, I'm talking about the Capital Development Fund, but of course many other partners as well. We use SMART ODA to reveal the market, to help financial service providers to develop the business models that will help them meet the real needs of women and men, and through these approaches to crowd in domestic and South-South capital to scale up and replicate these models, including by connecting financial service providers to formal banking sector. So here I'm giving examples of how we use ODA to unlock domestic resources. By making poor female clients attractive to investors, we're using ODA to unlock domestic capital, including previously unproductive savings, that can then be directed into financial services that promote local markets, smallholder agriculture, SME, SMI development, education for girls, and so on. Investment in appropriate and transformative local infrastructure is a critical accompaniment to achieving financial inclusion if women are to be able to engage with their local economies. We believe that the two together can help turn infrastructure corridors into economic corridors that can benefit women and men equally. We believe that by mobilizing savings out of the mattresses and into the real economy, and by attracting domestic investment dollars out of the capital cities and into the local economic space, and by de-risking these investments through smart application of grants, loans, and credit enhancements, others will gain confidence to invest. Public resources through fiscal transfer systems will never be sufficient to meet all of the demand to build local infrastructure that's needed for vibrant local economies. So, through structured project finance, for investments in infrastructure such as roads, warehouses, energy generation, value chains, and climate resilience, we can crowd in greater private investment and enterprises by lowering the costs of doing business. For instance, currently, and you'll be hearing more about this when His Excellency from Tanzania speaks, currently in the Iringa region of Tanzania, we're supporting female entrepreneurs to introduce a small hydropower plant to generate electricity in the rural areas of Tanzania, helping them to structure a deal that aims to attract approximately $1 million in domestic financing from a local bank. The project will generate 317 kilowatts of hydropower for rural electrification, which will be instrumental in expanding future opportunities for small-scale enterprise development and jobs creation, including for women. In UNCDF's experience, strategically placed ODA to, for example, build sustainable models to distribute fiscal resources more equitably, or to expand the distribution systems of financial markets, can leverage domestic resources at ratios of 1 to 10, or in many cases, quite a bit more. This includes fiscal decentralization, innovative municipal finance, and structured project finance for social and economic impact at the local level. Overall, relevant studies show that providing access to financial resources and capital for women and gender-sensitive investments not only increases inclusive growth, but it also helps to reduce income gaps. Recognizing that a blend of gender-sensitive public and private investment will be required to meet the needs of local development, UNCDF, UNDP, and UN Women have designed the Inclusive and Equitable Local Development Program that Her Excellency from Sweden mentioned earlier, which works in harmony with ongoing local development programs to test ways of unlocking private finance for potentially transformative infrastructure projects that would benefit women. ELD, that's the acronym for the program, focuses on gender-sensitive infrastructure projects at the local level, such as feeder roads, bridges, microhydro, that have potential to be significant drivers of women's economic empowerment. The program applies a variety of investment modalities, including structured project finance, public-private partnerships, and small and medium enterprise cluster finance. Through the transformative impact financing approach, UNCDF puts its local development finance instruments to work to unlock domestic capital, with a special emphasis on the development impact as a measure of success. We will look particularly at the infrastructure investments that confront and address barriers to women's economic inclusion. In closing, let me just say that to step up action for unlocking domestic resources for women's economic empowerment, we believe that we need smart and predictable ODA that helps pave the way for domestic capital formation for women's economic empowerment. We need the full commitment of the international community to keep women at the forefront of the FFD, post-2015, and UNFCCC agendas. We need to act locally, not just nationally, because it's at the local level that empowerment happens, that economic acceleration happens, that participation happens, and where stepped up capital investment in financial inclusion, local infrastructure, and entrepreneurship can drive changes in the real economy for women. As the saying goes, paths are made by walking. So thank you for being with us this afternoon and for joining our efforts to champion transformative impact financing as an approach to make resources and markets more accessible and equal for women. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Judith. Judith mentioned the word infrastructure about 5 times in her presentation and the importance of local economic development in terms of infrastructure. She gave the example of feeder roads. As you know, many of you who are in the audience today are or are working with women entrepreneurs in developing countries to help them succeed. Many of these women are located in rural areas. Therefore, the local infrastructure development that Judith is talking about is critical in getting their products and their goods and services to market. If you think about coffee, for example, coffee is grown at high altitudes in rural areas, and we can help those women grow good coffee. But if the rains wash the roads out, that coffee's not going to market. And this is why understanding the issues at the local level is critically important, and then mobilizing resources to those areas, which is the work that Judith just described, is also such an important part of that. Governments take a national view, they think extractive industries, they think about the roads to the mines, they think about that. We're talking about women's economic empowerment, particularly in rural areas, and it deserves and it requires local infrastructure development. Now, to hear about the work in partnership that UN Women is doing with UNCDF, supported also by the governments here today, I'd like to pass the floor to Mohammed Abadi, who's the Local Development Finance Program Manager for the United Nations Capital Development Fund. Mohammed, please.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Allow me, in view of the short time, to start the discussion very quickly and start to say that the Istanbul Programme for Action for the LDCs 2010-2020, the UNCTAD reports of 2013 and 2014 on the status of the LDCs, the outcome document of the Cotonou Conference on building productive capacities in the LDCs, all clearly demonstrate an awareness among all governments and development practitioners that investing in productive capacities and local infrastructure is really the key to sustainable and inclusive economic growth. LDCs are generally categorized with dependencies on one or two main economic sectors, along with a very large rate of population growth. In fact, in 30 years from now, it is estimated that 1 in 4 people entering the labor market in this world will be in a country categorized as a least developed country. How can we respond to the current and future challenge of accommodating this massive labor force supply? Ladies and gentlemen, investing local infrastructure which responds to the needs of women and men and productive capacities will be the key to really sustaining economies today and in the future to come. The Inclusive and Equitable Local Development Program was designed by UNCDF, by UN Women and UNDP to respond to this specific challenge through its transformative impact financing approach by unlocking domestic capital for public and private infrastructure projects which can have a transformative impact on women's economic empowerment and entrepreneurship. Starting from a gender-sensitive local economic assessment, happy to say it's the first in the United Nations system. In partnership with local governments, we are able to analyze and identify the structural impediments that are an obstacle which prevent poor women and men from entering into the labor market and income-generating activities. For example, if women have to spend 4 hours fetching water, then ILD will work with the local authorities to utilize their capital mandate and unlock fiscal transfer from central government to local government to invest directly in water infrastructure projects that can save women this considerable amount of time, which then they can use to engage into the labor market or income generating activities. And thus creating that enabling environment necessary at the local level by responding to these barriers that women face at the local level. At the same time, the local economic assessment will allow us to examine the role of the private sector at the local level, its potential for growth, its driving sectors, and the forward and backward linkages in the economy. How is it related to the local, to other local economies, to the national economies, to the regional and the global markets as well? And with this in mind, ILD will identify a pipeline of investable projects. These are women enterprises. These are gender-sensitive businesses that we're able to identify, which are large enough to have a transformative impact on the livelihoods of the communities and in creating jobs for women and men. ILD will work with these enterprises. We will invest our grant mechanisms to build their capacities, upgrade their business processes and their financial sheets, and bring them up to a level where they become attractive for commercial financing, commercial banks. And on the other hand, ILD will work with the commercial institutions and financing banks to lessen the market friction between the supply and the demand by building their own capacities so that they will actually understand the market in front of them. They understand the importance of investing into local entrepreneurship and women's enterprises. And we will look at reducing those risk mitigation policies that are set in place that are currently making it impossible for very many women to actually qualify for these domestic loans and domestic banking financing. And by doing so, ILD will try to minimize this market friction between the commercial banks and the women enterprises. The success of our interventions through ILD will be measured through the impact of our local development finance investments on the job creation, on women's employment, and the increase these investments are making in net local fiscal space, as well as gross fixed capital formation at the local level. This will increase the local economic development and at the local level, which will then transform to the national level. To sustain our approach, the knowledge, the experiences, the capacity building materials for women enterprises that we are going to be developing with UN Women and UNDP, their collective experiences will have to be shared. Connecting women entrepreneurs with other entrepreneurs at the local, national, and the global levels will be instrumental in spreading this approach globally for women. By doing so, women are able to learn from each other. They're able to learn from others' experiences and help to champion a new generation of enterprises. In this regard, ILD has partnered with empowerwomen.org, which will provide us with this platform to make this a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, let me end by saying that I truly believe that the key to sustaining our future economies will depend on whether we invest in women today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. And soon we're going to hear from Empower Women, but before we go to Empower Women, we're going to turn to His Excellency to hear the Tanzanian perspective. So His Excellency Mr. Tuvaku Nathaniel Mahongo, the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary from the Permanent Mission of the United Republic of Tanzania. Sir, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. It is indeed for me a great pleasure to be at this podium with this kind of with this balance of gender representation. Judith just made me know how women feel when they are underrepresented. But let me begin by offering the obvious, and that is most often the fact that empowering women empowers society is generally taken for granted. It is common sense. But regrettably, not too many politicians or societies do always recognize this logic. Thankfully, Sweden is one of the few great exceptions. So progress being made in this regard should not be and must not be taken for granted. A case in point, in Tanzania, we have made great strides towards the achievement of the MDGs, especially in the fields of education, health, maternal mortality, among others. We have also made steady progress in advancing women's participation and representation in the political, legislative, executive, and judiciary spheres. However, as in many developing countries, we still suffer from weak infrastructure at the local levels, presenting considerable challenges to women participation in the economic sector. In most cases, this constraint is exacerbated by the availability of limited funds on gender equality programs. As a result, our focus lies in ensuring that investments in productive capacities at the local level are given priority, especially those that target women. We also know one thing: removing obstacles to women empowerment and prosperity requires a broad partnership at all levels, working side by side with governments, public and private institutions, communities, and not forgetting families. We can and we must do our part to ensure that women everywhere have access to the resources, the skills and knowledge, and the opportunities to become the drivers of their own long-term growth and success. It is true that lack of economic freedom is the root cause of many gender-related problems. Responding to these barriers requires joint efforts from the public and private sector to create an enabling environment for women and increasing access to and control over resources, including domestic financial resources for business startups. In Tanzania, we have established a Women Development Fund for the mainland and a Women Entrepreneurship Development Fund for Zanzibar. It is an endorsement for the fact that economic empowerment, especially that of women through access to credit, is important to sustainable development and poverty eradication. It is in this regard we welcome our collaboration with UNCDF to test its financial instruments for private sector development at the local level. The financing mechanisms proposed provide project development and financing support in the form of seed capital, credit enhancement, and technical expertise. We are confident that proposed instruments will unleash and trigger broader and deeper local economic developments, focusing on projects that support local communities and women empowerment. Consequently, local economic infrastructure projects that are otherwise unbankable have their risks minimized and are taken to an investment-ready stage. As a result, they are able to attract equity investors and access domestic commercial capital. Happily, to date, through our collaboration with UNCDF, more than 30 commercially viable instruments promoted by public and or private developers are on the pipeline for domestic commercial funding. Combined, they offer potential leverage of more than $200 million in domestic commercial financing, which are being unlocked at different stages of our development. They also offer an invaluable tool and opportunity in promoting inclusive financing. In this context, Tanzania is pleased to be one of the first countries considered to pilot the Inclusive and Equitable Local Development Initiative. We see it as contributing to unlocking domestic capital for women's economic empowerment and entrepreneurship. We also believe it will be a springboard for female-headed enterprises or gender-sensitive businesses for domestic capital financing. We have no doubt that this approach to local economic development and empowerment will have a transformative impact on the livelihood of our communities and families. We therefore look forward to strengthening the collaboration with UN Women, UNCDF, and UNDP on this pilot program and its innovative transformative impact financing approach. We are grateful to the governments of Sweden and Luxembourg that have supported the initiative. Such partnerships as we have here today can help bring women into the economy and help remove barriers to entry. Indeed, as I was walking here in the room, I was reminded of a resolution that is annually being sponsored by Israel on development, entrepreneurship and development. It is an initiative that deserves, at least as members of the United Nations, our continuing and collective support. We are confident, working together, we can achieve far-reaching policy changes towards greater gender equality in key areas of the socio-economic spectrum in support of the post-2015 development agenda as the Minister has called for. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Excellency Mwangi from Tanzania. Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency touched on a very important point. He talked about entrepreneurship, of course, but what we're focusing on today in terms of inclusive and equitable local development is that those missing pieces. We can have entrepreneurs become successful, and yet how are they going to get their goods and services to market? It's one thing to build a road, as we highlighted a minute ago, to build the road, but then what's going on the road? When you think about the cars to the extent that they exist in houses, that there is a car in the house. Maybe it's a cart, simply a cart. Whatever that wheeled vehicle is that you may have access to, chances are that your husband just took it off to work or to market or somewhere else. So the kind of when we look at the gender assessment that Mohammed mentioned, when we start the work that we're doing with a gender-sensitive local economic assessment, it takes into account these very important factors, not only about car ownership or cart ownership or the ownership of animals that move goods from A to B, but who actually has access to those. Because we can focus on entrepreneurship. We can have women producing tomatoes, and then they all produce tomatoes, and there's a glut of tomatoes and the price goes down. Those products have to move out of the local economy into the next or the regional markets. And so therefore, a local assessment has to take into consideration not only what it is the entrepreneurs are doing, but the infrastructure requirement that will enable success. And that is roads. But then it's new businesses as well, as His Excellency said as well, like, for example, providing new transport, means of transport and transport systems. This opens up another avenue of business, and that is, of course, essential to women who are service providers, which means women who move from the house to somewhere else to be the chefs, to provide services outside the home. So on that note, the local economic assessment is critically important, and it's the building block of the work we're doing on inclusive, equitable and local development, of which, of course, the Government of Canada is seized. So I'd like to pass the floor now to Her Excellency Dr. Kelly Leitch, the Minister of Labour and Minister of the Status of Women for Canada. May we have a round of applause, please, for Her Excellency.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much to the Government of Sweden and UNCDF for hosting this forum. Le Canada est depuis longtemps conscient que la croissance durable de l'économie dépend des femmes. Nous croyons que lorsqu'on leur donne les moyens d'être financièrement autonomes, les femmes peuvent grandement contribuer à la croissance économique. Elles ne sont alors pas seulement les récolter les fruits de cette autonomie, au contraire, toute leur famille en profite. For Canada, we have been very focused with respect to women entrepreneurs. Our budget in 2014 had a focus, a mandate by our Prime Minister to focus on women entrepreneurs and corporate leadership for women. In developing countries, Canada focuses on increasing economic opportunities for women, strengthening their leadership positions, and supporting changes of institutional environments so that women entrepreneurs in developing countries have great opportunities. And in particular, our international development assistance, we support women entrepreneurs with training and particularly access to financial services, as was mentioned. And one of the things I'm also very proud of is that Canadian firms are focused on this as well. By way of example, Scotiabank, which is very prevalent in South America. They're the third largest employer in Peru, but they have developed specifically for the South American market a microloan program so that those women that do not necessarily have access to large financial institutions that will provide them funding, they can go to the Scotiabank, which is a Canadian-led firm. And I'm very proud of that they've created this microfinancing circumstance for women throughout South America so that they would be able to grow their businesses. And it goes hand in glove with the Government of Canada's initiatives to support women entrepreneurs globally. Now at home, we've also been focused on this, and this is what drives also what we do on an international basis. And many people ask why at home we've become so focused on women entrepreneurs in the last 18 months. In Canada, 16% of small and medium-sized businesses are owned by women. It is a growing number, though, almost 2 to 1 women starting businesses than men in Canada. This 16%, though, punch above their weight. They generated $149 billion in economic wealth in Canada last year, and they employed 1.5 million Canadians on a population base of literally only 15 million Canadians at work. They're doing an outstanding job. And that's why our government, our Prime Minister, has been so focused on them. And a number of the things that we are doing and hope to translate, we're happy to share our experiences with women entrepreneurs over the last year, as we've had an expert panel on championing and mentoring women entrepreneurs, providing them that training and guidance that Luna had alluded to. We have an international advisory board that focuses on medium-sized women businesses to facilitate trade and growing their firms. Canada is only so big, there's only so many people on our enormous land mass, so we do need to trade. And we also have a leadership council for women. One of the most important things, though, on all of these items is that we have men on all of these boards and advisory boards. This is an integrated approach so that women have opportunities. And then finally, as I mentioned, on the development side, we have leadership from the private sector. I'm very pleased to say that just in November of 2014, the Bank of Montreal, BMO in Canada as it's called, stepped up with a new $2 billion fund to support women entrepreneurs in Canada. And so we are working together, the private sector with government, in order to provide these extremely opportunistic opportunities for women so that they can grow their firms, because we know they contribute to the Canadian economy and also to the economy abroad. In addition to this, we have community-based programming. We have a very large country, and it's very different. I can tell you that living in northern Canada is very different than living in downtown Toronto. And since 2007, we've invested over $60 million in community-based programs, many of which are focused on women entrepreneurs, in an effort to make sure that those local training opportunities, local mentoring opportunities are made available to women across the country, many of which, this may be the first time they're ever starting a business, and provides them economic opportunities to support their families. I think what has been said at many of the sessions over the course of the last number of days, and we speak to it at home all the time, is that we know when women are empowered, when they have opportunities to be financially independent, it actually deals with so many other issues as well, whether that be violence against women and girls, whether that be issues with regards to safety and security, whether that be, quite frankly, just being able to know that you have that self-worth of independence. And so our focus as a government has been making sure that those women entrepreneurs are well supported, help them create jobs to support their neighbors and friends, but also for their families, and opportunities that do grow both our Canadian economy and that abroad. We know that when women succeed, our country succeeds, Canada succeeds, but also, quite frankly, we're contributing to the world succeeding. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A brilliant example of why we're focusing on women's economic empowerment through local economic development. Minister, can you give us that figure again, please, of the contribution of women entrepreneurs to the growth of the Canadian economy, please?
So the numbers. Hello. The numbers for 2012 into 2013 is that women-led companies in Canada, so these are the ones that are owned. There are many that are partially owned, so that doesn't include these. Employed 1.5 million Canadians, 1.6 million Canadians, and generated $149 billion in economic wealth. And we know that they, in addition to that, hire more women. So we know that they're taking women from either part-time jobs or not having a role and providing them a full-time job. They also invest more back into their local communities, whether that's financially as well as volunteer hours. This is a win-win-win, and that's why the Canadian government, myself, our Prime Minister are so focused on making sure women entrepreneurs are successful.
Thank you very much, Minister. Very impressive, 149 billion. So I think when people come to His Excellency Nathaniel Mhongo here from Tanzania and say, why is it you're choosing to invest in women entrepreneurs in your country, I'm sure that you're looking for, through women's entrepreneurship, the contribution to employment, growing employment and economic growth that can be secured and is being secured, Canada leading the way here, demonstrating that in your country as well, sir. So the Government of Canada has also been very active in supporting initiatives in the United Nations in support of women's economic empowerment. And I'd like to call on Anna Falth to please share with us some high points on the empowerwomen.org website that is available to you. It's a window into the world of women's entrepreneurship in developing countries, and it does highlight those companies that are actively interested in sourcing from women in your countries. Anna, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Meg. First of all, let me thank the Government of Canada for supporting us and for allowing us to build this platform and this movement for women's economic empowerment. Without their support, there wouldn't have been anything, so thank you so much. Empower Women have started off as a knowledge gateway together with Canada in September 2013, we launched the Knowledge Gateway for Women's Economic Empowerment. And over time, it has really grown into a community, to a movement for women's economic empowerment. We have so many exciting members, partners on the platform. And I will talk a little bit about how we are going to use this platform for the YELT program. What we are going to do is to really look at what is happening offline. Not everybody is connected. And actually, one of the first questions that I got 2 years ago when I presented the concept of Empower Women, which was just a concept at the time, how will you reach the women who don't have computers? And I will talk a little bit about one of the solutions that we have found to this issue, and maybe some of you were in the audience at the time. And then we bring all these good practices that will come out of the YELT program, bring it online, share it, and inspire change in other countries. Inspire change from one woman entrepreneur in one region to a woman entrepreneur in another region. We have today more than 5,000 registered members. We have about 140,000 visitors that are coming and taking advantage of the wealth of knowledge on the platform, but have not yet taken the step to be an active member on the platform. We have about 24 different partners. We have UNCDF, we have UNDP, we have a lot of partners outside the UN as well that are all coming together for the purpose of driving the women's economic empowerment agenda. We have lots of activities. I'm not going to cover all these activities, but just for you to get an idea on all the things we do webinars and Google Hangouts and e-discussions, we do blogs and a lot of things. What I'm going to focus on today is just two things, the Business Hub and iLearn. The Business Hub is a platform that will bring together businesses that have or are driving a gender equality and women's economic empowerment agenda, and there are many out of them. We want to capture them here. We want to show the world who are the ones that are really committed, and not only committed, but actually doing something about it. And we want to connect those with women entrepreneurs, women collectives, so that they can match globally, and if it doesn't work locally, at least they can work nationally, regionally, globally. And we also realize that the business institutions, there are many of them that are not necessarily a gender-responsive company or a women collective, but are playing a role in the business community, such as business schools. We have the Wezo Fund of Kenya that is working on women's procurement, for example, in the government of Kenya. Each of these members are getting their own dedicated space where they can talk about who they are as a company or as a collective, and they can talk about what they do for women's economic empowerment. We are showcasing here one company, just to showcase, but had signed the Women Empowerment Principles and taken the next steps to actually do very good initiatives in the workplace, in the value chain, and in the communities where they operate. This is also the space where they can do the call out and say, we are looking for these kind of women entrepreneurs in the market. We are looking to connect. We are looking to partner. So this is also an opportunity for these businesses to connect. iLearn. This is our solution that we have been working on for the last 3 months. As I was mentioning, at the time when we conceptualized empowerwomen.org, we were asked by women, how can we access this information if we don't have a computer? We were approached by Facebook in November, and they said, we are launching our internet.org program. What we are going to do, we are going to negotiate with telecom and telecoms in different countries around the world. They are going to give a dedicated space free of charge on cell phones. So they have built an internet.org app, and within that app, we are putting our content. They wanted UN Women's content on this app. They realized that it's a lot of value for women to access this through their cell phones. So this space is conceptualized specifically for feature phones, not smartphones. It is available on smartphone, tablets, and computers, but conceptualized specifically for the very basic feature phones. So when we got approached by Facebook, we're like, okay, what do we do now? What is it, the information that women entrepreneurs could benefit? That we can do a global approach, and what is it that women have in common? What women have in common, women entrepreneurs, is that they have similar challenges, as they set up the companies. They have similar solutions to set up the companies. And here we have a storytelling platform where women entrepreneurs tell their stories on how they went about establishing the business, overcoming challenges, and you can see in many of these stories there is a turning point where they got coaching, where they got support, they got training, they got something from either donor, from an NGO, or from somewhere where you can see the turning point when they're being connected to the market and they are growing fast. So we have a lot of different very exciting stories here. And through the YELT program, the women entrepreneurs that we will be working with will have a chance to tell their stories and feature them on this platform to inspire other women in other countries beyond the YELT program. Just to give one example, which is a very common example actually, but this is Olivia from Nigeria. She talks about her awareness of actually how you shouldn't muddle up private and business money, which is a very common phenomenon in every country in the world. You start a business, you get some money during the day, and then the children need some food or they need go to the doctor, and the money gets muddled up. She tells the story on how she learned to separate that and what she did about it. This is just very quickly. We have so far, we have it in English, French next week, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, and we're also looking to see if we can get support to get it to Bangladesh and Pakistan, which Facebook is really pushing us to do, but we also have quite limited capacity in translating all this material. But this is just to get a sense of the rollout of this platform on the app. It is available through the internet on empowerwomen.org/ilearn, but through the app, this is the rollout phase. And I just want to make a little pitch for the campaign, finally. We have launched a campaign, I'm Woman campaign. It's an amazing campaign. We hear stories about women's economic empowerment from all over the world. People are sending in their pictures, and they tell just a little paragraph on what economic empowerment is to them. And I invite all of you to please join this campaign. It's very exciting. Women are telling about the issues they face in the workplace, the issues they face as women as an entrepreneur. Even men are talking about how they benefited from the mothers, grandmothers, the sisters, and other empowered women around them. So I invite you to join I'm Woman campaign, and it is on empowerwomen.org/I'mWoman. And finally, we can do this together. And we can do it through YELT. And what is exciting about YELT, it's a very innovative project in itself, and we are going to use innovative technologies to make this happen and to share all the knowledge that comes out of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much. Of course, ICT is a challenge to women in rural areas in many developing countries. Luna here just tells me that there are 121 million cell phones in Bangladesh. So when Anna's talking to you about penetration and reaching women in rural areas, clearly the cell phone and the cooperation with Mark Zuckerberg and the Facebook company is going to be very facilitative in helping propagate messages. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our panel discussion. We'd love to engage with you, to respond to questions you may have, to pose to the panelists. I'm going to take 4 questions. The lady there, the gentleman here, the lady there, and the gentleman here, please, in that order. And then I'm going to take 2 questions from Twitter. Madame, you have the floor. We have microphones. Can we? Yep, please. Mohammed, can you please help with the microphones? Yeah. So first to the lady in the middle of the row up there with her hand up, and the second microphone to the gentleman with the camera here, please. Madame, could you please raise your hand so they know where you are? Thank you. Okay, she's going to get 2. You're going to look like a star.
Thank you.
Please, madam, please introduce yourself and name your organization or association when you do that.
Thank you for that, too. I will only use one. My name is Dr. Susan Chebet, Member of Parliament for Kenyan Parliament. And I'm very impressed this afternoon for the presentations on entrepreneurship. In Kenya, we have women using the WESO fund. Somebody has mentioned it there. The WESO fund has been set aside by the government of Kenya to empower women. The only challenge that we have at the moment is how women can use the WESO fund. They can access the WESO fund, but we need something like cottage industries. If somebody can tell me about cottage industries, we want the women to work from home because they have other things that they do, so they find it a challenge to leave their home and go to the marketplace or to go and work elsewhere. So if we have that solution, I think it can really improve the entrepreneurship program in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Second question to the gentleman here with the camera. We had 2 microphones. Where's the other one? You have it? Great. Please, sir, please introduce yourself.
My name is Christian Gatlin, and I'm from Pilgrim School.
I'm sorry, which school?
Pilgrim School.
Pilgrim School. Mm-hmm.
My question is, can you give an example of a gender-specific investment?
Mm-hmm.
And are there any access to mentors?
Thank you. And the lady sitting next to you, that was a question about gender-specific investment. An example, please, and mentors.
Hello, my name is Rachel Blau. I'm hail from Long Island. I go to the Schechter School of Long Island, and I'm here with Girls Learn International, a program of the Feminist Majority Foundation. My question is directed towards Minister Tuvako. My school has been in close relationship with a school in your country in the Arusha region, and so my question for you is, as we know, women in the workforce are directly related to girls in school. When you get more women in the workforce, you get more girls in school because they have time to send their girls to school and money to do so. And so my question is, how do you continue the economic independence in schools, and how do you help with that, help continue that theme all throughout childhood to promote independence?
Thank you very much. Economic independence in schools. And you, sir?
Yes, my name is Moijo Kaikai, the Minister of Social Welfare, Gender and Children's Affairs from Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone.
Yes. My question is, in all of these interventions that you've spoken about, I know about the UNCDF, but there has been very little role of the gender ministries in all of the interventions. Even when it comes to UNCDF in Sierra Leone, it was more of you dealing with the local government ministry than the gender ministry. In other words, there was no role in all your interventions for the gender ministry. And because of that, so I cannot even sit down here and say there is any success story for the intervention in Sierra Leone as far as gender is concerned. And also, I'm of the opinion that for a very long time, UN Women has to step up. Yes. UN Women has to step up. Because if UN Women is seen as the vehicle for women's empowerment in the UN system, yes, but they have very little resources, yes, to really support programs. Yes. So because of that, we come and talk the talk, but then when we go back, we are not able to walk the walk. Yes. We talk a lot here. We come here for CSW, UNDP. So all I'm advising, as you are putting forward a program, yes, please make sure you involve the gender ministries in all of these countries where they are going to be implemented. You know, because so that when we come here next time, we will be singing the praise. And my appeal now is this. As you know, Sierra Leone has just come from a long war in the past, and now we are being affected by Ebola. So because of that, women who were poor before this time are now even poorer. We now have female-headed households. I am appealing that in doing your interventions, please include the 3 Ebola-affected countries in your intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Your point's very well taken. We have a member of the panel who I have not yet introduced who will be responding to the question on cottage industries. This is Randy Davis, the director from UNCDF, please.
Thank you.
UNDP, my apologies. UNDP, my apologies. Thank you.
I'm just going to echo, first of all, what you've just said. I think it's absolutely essential that we all invest now in the Ebola-stricken countries and look very carefully at the particular gender the longer-term recovery from a gender lens. And I think it's something very important that we bring to every debate, and we need to continue to reiterate. Cottage industries, I think the question that you asked is very specific, but I think it points to what I think is the real benefit of the program, or the approach of the program, the joint program of UNDP, UNCDF, and UN Women. And that is that rather than being a top-down approach that looks at problems in an academic way, it really is centering around going to the local level, working with women to understand what are the particular bottlenecks that they face in their location, in their cultural context. And in the context that you've raised, you're talking about an issue of time use or being homebound for whatever reason. And the issue is to look at what the bottlenecks are, if they have home-based industries, how they can still grow those industries and get their goods to the market. And it's a matter of sitting down, looking at those problems, and if the problems are getting perhaps one of them to come forward and be the person who takes the goods to the market as a collective, or hiring someone who can take the goods. You know, it's a very specific question, but I think it speaks to the strengths of this program. And one of the issues I was going to mention in the closing, which is that the real, this is a very pragmatic program that is not about bottlenecks in theory, it's about bottlenecks in practice. It's going to the local level, sitting with women and sitting with local governments and saying, what is the problem that they're facing? This is not 1995. This is a new time when we know there are millions of women engaged in all sorts of informal, formal activities in fisheries, agriculture, home industries, sewing, I mean, the full gamut of industries, especially in Africa. I mean, women are doing all sorts of things. Now, how do we enable them to scale up the activities and not face the myriad of bottlenecks, which sometimes are financial, but sometimes are not? Their security, as we heard, their transportation, their care, the time burden of care. How do we help them collectivize their work so they can overcome those bottlenecks? I know I didn't answer your question exactly, but...
Thank you very much, Randy. Your Excellency, the question to Tanzania on economic independence, please.
Yeah. I think the question to me was about how do we ensure women's economic independence. And I think in Tanzania we're doing it at two levels. The first is at the level of education, making sure that girls, all children get the necessary education as a tool of empowerment. We have we had universal primary education. The government only this year decided that we would transcend that. We would now proceed to have not only universal primary education, but universal secondary education as well. That's the first level. The second level is through, I think, what we've been talking about, transformative impact financing approaches, to find innovative means where you can target women and girls, particularly on initiatives that could make a difference to their lives. And I think this clearly is an area where we can make a difference, but also it's an area that needs a broader partnership. And I thank you that your school is also engaging, at least as an interest in Tanzania. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Agenda-specific investments.
Okay, so the question was asked, what is a gender-specific investment? I think that's examples, and I think it's a great question because in many ways, actually, how we look at gender-specific investment has evolved quite a bit over the years. I think, you know, there's been a substantial amount of attention and time spent on investing specifically in activities that are run by or for women. So industries or small enterprises that are headed by women, specifically directing investment towards income and employment opportunities for women, and basically looking at ways to generate directly through investment in women, greater leadership, greater income opportunities, and so on, through investment in women themselves. I think we're at a stage now where we're looking at a much broader range of structural issues that need to be addressed in order to provide an environment where women can actually be empowered and participate in their economies. Some of the examples that we were talking about up here relate to, for instance, infrastructure investments where we know that transport or access to markets may be a major impediment to access and to providing outlets for products that women are producing. So those can be investments that are gender-specific investments in the sense that they are unblocking specific barriers of access, but those roads are not necessarily being built by women, and they're not necessarily being directly maintained by women. So the point is that the analysis that is engaged to identify what the barriers are, what's standing in the way of access, may not provide a response that means it's the women themselves that need to clear that barrier. That's why, in part, for many, many reasons, but one of the many, many reasons why it's so important for men to be engaged in the solutions as well. But they can also relate to solutions for childcare. Providing daytime childcare so that women can engage in market activities and productive activities. So it can be a whole range of investments that ultimately will provide a more equal playing field so that women can benefit equally with men. Then I just want to our participant who mentioned the comments about Sierra Leone. I don't have any direct data about our impact specifically on women in Sierra Leone, but what your comment will impel me to do is to run back to the office and look at our evaluations and see how we did and make sure that we're really looking at how our local development approaches, which are yes, as you say, very much dealing with fiscal transfer systems down to the local level and working directly with actors who are active at the local level. And it's true that frequently ministries of women are not as robustly represented at the local level as they are at the central level. And so that's a challenge to us to make sure that even when we are engaging at the local level, we are also engaging with ministries of dealing with gender issues and women's issues. Second, on the Ebola-affected countries, Randy has already partially responded. I would just say that your comment comes at a very opportune time because the UN system is in the midst of developing the response for the Ebola-affected countries, for all three of those countries. We're all engaged in those discussions very actively, and so your comment is very well received, and we'll make sure that that's put into the consideration. So thank you very much.
Now a brief word from Luna Shamsi-Joha from Bangladesh.
Very briefly, if we are in technology, the cyber highway can be maintained by women. There's no reason why we can't. And we can all, be on this highway. The ecosystem and infrastructure of IT is accessible to all.
And I would encourage those of you interested in that to speak with Luna after the session, as she's doing job creation for women in IT in rural Bangladesh. We have several questions from our Twitter participants. We're going to answer those through through our knowledge gateway, through Empower Women. Thank you for providing those questions. I'm going to ask one more, give the floor to the Deputy Ambassador of Bhutan for one question, and then we're going to close this. I'm going to pass to Randy to close the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. Firstly, if I may very briefly thank the distinguished panelists for such an excellent presentation. Also thank the organizers for this very timely event. As a small LDC, Bhutan, we've achieved remarkable social economic progress, very high rates of growth, but increasingly a major challenge that we're facing is growing disparities, particularly in income. And we are particularly concerned that it impacts women and youth. This is a major challenge that we've been facing. I think as you mentioned that time, Meg, at the national level, great policies are in place. We've got very, very ambitious stated policy objectives. We've come up with very clear plans of actions, frameworks. So all these things are in place in terms of at the national, at the policy level. However, we do face a very serious challenge when it comes to implementation. And I think this is something that I think several of the panelists pointed out too, that at the end of the day, it must translate into actionable projects on the ground at the local community levels, as you highlighted. So this is something that we face as a small, least developed country. And we're very interested to know from UNCDF how can UNCDF help countries like Bhutan. We seem to have the intentions, we seem to have our goals, policies, our hearts in the right place. But unfortunately, due to various constraints, whether it's resources, whether it's institutional capacity, whether it's on the underdeveloped financial sector, underdeveloped private sector, these are sort of day-to-day realities we face in our countries. And in this context, I think firstly we do welcome the TIF initiative under the ILD initiative. It's, I think, a very welcome initiative for a country like Bhutan, and we really hope to be able to be a partner in this very important initiative. I'd like to learn more from UNCDF on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and pertinent questions there. I'm going to pass the floor to Randy Davis for concluding remarks, and I'm sure, given that we're out of time, that my colleagues on the panel here would welcome engagement with you on that particular topic. Randy? Thank you.
I'm sorry, we're going to take some of the questions offline because I can see them getting agitated outside to kick us out. So, and it happened to me yesterday. But let me just very quickly conclude this session thanking our panelists, some who left, but many who are here. And I think personally I found it to be an excellent panel. I was really engaged in listening to what you had to say, and I think it was really fabulous. I'm sorry we don't have time for more comments. Let me just say that on behalf of UNDP, UNCDF, and UN Women, this is a policy priority for all of us. We all see that we have to bring our mandates together and work towards getting women's, really putting an engine and fire behind women's economic empowerment. I was looking forward to identifying some of the key items that each of the panelists had raised, because there were so many good nuggets in those discussions, but I hope we can get a summary of those discussions. As we heard, and maybe the only big takeaway I'm going to take is that we need to really keep the flame on women's economic empowerment, and the need to unlock the bottlenecks and domestic capital, other ways of mobilizing investments for women's entrepreneurship and women's economic empowerment in all of the discussions we're having as we go forward in the discussions on post-2015, on the new development financing, the means of implementation, and the climate finance, which also is very important. So if there's one thing I'd like to leave the room with, it's this real importance of women's economic empowerment for the well-being of societies and for overall development achievement, and the need for us to bring that into everything we do.